Welcome to Living with Purpose. I am so excited to have Amanda Schneider on the podcast. She is the founder of ThinkLab, but more importantly, she really talks about this intersection of future work, Gen Z, and then this whole notion of design. So it's going to be a great conversation. With that, please join me in welcoming Amanda.
Hi, everyone.
So let's start off with just you sharing your growing up. How did that shape what you're doing?
Yeah, I grew up as one of two girls, and I had a very girl power dad. I grew up with the message that you can do anything that the boys can do. I remember specifically every Valentine's Day, my father would leave a rose on my nightstand along with a card that basically said, "You're enough. Exactly how you are, you're enough." And I feel like that message being directly given to me from my father and also modeled for me by my mother really raised me to believe that I was going to be able to do whatever I chose to do.
I love the fact that this notion of you are enough. And I think that's a very important message for all of us. Whether you are a girl or a boy or a woman or a man, how do we have that self-respect of authenticity? So I just love this saying that your father had. But share a little bit about his journey, the environment you were in, the school that you went to, the kinds of things that actually helped shape you.
So I am the youngest of two girls. So I have a older sister who is 2 years, 2 months, 2 days, and 2 hours older than me. So we did a lot together. She was always very small for her age. I was always very big for my age. So my mother would always dress us like twins, and people would ask if we were twins. We do not resemble each other a lot. She is about 5'3", long red hair past her rear, glasses, freckles, pale skin. She's a computer programmer, and I'm about 5'7", very outgoing, dark hair. We don't look like we were cut from the same cloth now, but we definitely had just a great upbringing. I was raised in a small town in Illinois, Galesburg, Illinois, 35,000 people. It was one of those towns that felt like everyone knew your business. I lived just outside of town. So we were about 7 miles outside of city center and lived on 3 acres. We jokingly called it horse apple acres because we had horses and apple trees. And horse apples is also another name for horse excrement. So it was a funny name to call it. But yeah, so grew up very much, very outdoorsy, lots of family-driven activities, and, just a really great childhood.
And then from school, where did you go from there? I mean, did you stay in town? Did you stay in the state? You decided that you were going to pursue something else? How did that unfold?
Yeah, so I was big into softball. I was big into the marching band. The marching band was a big thing in my hometown.
Really?
And kind of like the show Glee, the marching band wasn't some nerdy thing. We were better than our football team at that time. So the band was a coveted role to be in. So I auditioned to be a drum major at University of Illinois, which is the person, when the band comes out onto the field, they say under the direction of drum majors, Justin Sanchez, Amanda Christensen, like all of these. And I didn't make it my freshman year, but I really wanted to be a part of that community, a part of that experience. So ended up going to University of Illinois because they had my major, industrial design, and I wanted to be in the band. And so I did make drum major my sophomore year. A fun fact that I would say a lot of people that even know me well might not know about me, that I was a drum major at University of Illinois and just really enjoyed my college experience there. So lived on campus, studied industrial design, and ended up graduating. I think I graduated in 2001 with a degree in industrial design. And it was an interesting launching point because University of Illinois is a very engineering heavy school. And they had these huge job fairs. My now husband is an engineer, and they would have 500 companies come to recruit all of these engineers. And for the School of Industrial Design, I graduated with 22 students. There was not a lot of focus on job placement and the business side of design for the design school. So I started my sophomore year trying to get a job fair, like the engineering fair, off the ground. I failed my sophomore year. I failed again my junior year. And my senior year, I said, come hell or high water, I'm getting this thing going. So I literally mailed out 250 postcards across the IDSA, the Industrial Designers Society of America chapter of the Midwest. One postcard was answered. I cold called companies, and we ended up getting 12 companies in total to come my senior year. And one of the companies that came was the one company that answered those 250 hand-mailed postcards. And it was a company called Allsteel, a office furniture manufacturer, who came to the fair and hired me on the spot. And really fun fact, because that's how my career got started, but really fun fact is that job fair now in 2026 still happens today.
So, but that's such an amazing story of perseverance, right? That both your drum major and, the job fair, this was really about perseverance. And to our audience that are listening, if you set your mind to something, you will always accomplish it. It may not be tomorrow, it may not be day after tomorrow, but it will be. But you have to persevere. And what Amanda has just shown us is, hey, a industrial design school is not going to get 500 companies that are going to come and recruit. But they will come and recruit, and this actually became a great recruiting tool for her because she landed a job at one of the major furniture manufacturing companies. So in some ways, to our listeners, if you set your mind to something, you can do it. So there you are. So now you're working.
Yeah.
And how does that unfold into where you eventually landed up being?
Yeah. So funny story. My very first day working for this furniture company, I had a broken foot. I had broken my right foot. And this was before Uber was a thing. I was living in Muscatine, Iowa, an even smaller town right on the border of Iowa and Illinois. So I couldn't drive. There was no Uber to get me to work. So I called another industrial designer that I had met in the interview process, and we'll call her Sarah. And Sarah agreed to pick me up, take me to work. So we pull into the employee parking lot. We walk up to the door. She's 6'6", red hair, so I'm crutching in behind her like Tiny Tim. And our boss greets us at the door. She walks in, and our boss says to me, Amanda, we're going to be laying Sarah off today. She'll have her things out of her cubicle by 11:45, and then you can move your things in. So this is my introduction to the working world. And everyone, when I tell the story, is like, well, how did you get home? And the short answer to that is one of the engineers took me home, and then I learned to drive with my left foot. But I also really realized throughout that whole first year, starting that first day, it was not anything that furniture company was doing wrong. They had just gone, that was the dot bomb. So not a good time for the furniture industry. And they were going from a model where they had a lot of designers employed that they, at that time, forced to live in Muscatine, Iowa, because it was before this hybrid work was a thing. And so they needed design talent locally, and they were starting to outsource. Over the next year, they really started to lay off designers, and it happened about every other month till a year in. It was down to me and the head of design at the time. And that same boss sat me down again and said, Amanda, you seem to have an aptitude for marketing. Do you want to stay in design or go into marketing? So I thought about that question for a minute. And from my observation, a year into my career, the company was going through a rebrand. So all the marketers were getting promoted. And as I've stated, all the designers were getting fired. So I thought, well, marketers get promoted, designers get fired, I'll do that. So they actually paid for me to go back to school and get my MBA with a focus in marketing and market research, which is really, I feel like, where I figured out what I really loved about industrial design, why I chose that as a major, was because I loved the setup to the product development. And so I went back and got my MBA and ended up going into product development for them, eventually into sales, where I learned more about the industry. And finally, in 2011, I set out on my own and started my own business doing market research to the interior design industry specifically.
So you've had a flashing career. You've got a new book coming out.
I do.
Talk a little bit about the book and what motivated you to write the book and what are you trying to accomplish? So, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So the book really stemmed from my TED Talks. I did a talk in 2024, originally on the TEDx stage that was part of the less than 1% of TEDx talks that are pulled to TED.com. It is now tracking at around 500,000 views, which is amazing. And so I decided that the world probably wanted to hear a little bit more about this message. And the talk and the book really focus on the idea that work as we know it is kind of fragmenting. You can say it's failing. Workplace culture is definitely struggling today because the rules that traditional work were built around, being in an office, being face-to-face, being analog first, are not necessarily always true for the world that we're living in today, especially post-pandemic. So my book is titled Work for What's Next: Why Workplace Culture is Failing and How the Next Generation Can Fix It. And what the book explores is how we're still trying to play by some rules that were made for a different era. An era when the predominant workers were males with stay-at-home wives. The predominant era when we had to work 8 to 5 and work was really founded on physical bank structures, banker's hours, or assembly lines where you had to be there physically face-to-face. But a lot of knowledge work today happens digitally, happens behind a computer, happens across geographies, sometimes even across continents as globalization happens. So if we had the chance to rewrite work for the next era, what might that look like? And so the book pulls from a ton of research, about 3 years of studies that we've done specifically on Gen Z and what Gen Z sees with their fresh eyes. The earliest of Gen Z graduated in 2019, so just pre-pandemic. And so they have come into the world that is predominantly digital first. It doesn't mean office space is not important. Obviously, that's my core industry. I believe as we're freed up from a set work location, it puts more pressure on that physical location to perform. And nothing happens like when you're face-to-face breathing the same air with someone. However, if we want to continue to connect across geographies, across generations, across these digital divides, we have to look at rewriting the rules of work.
So talk a little bit about the key message so that people actually get excited about what you are suggesting.
So I would say pandemic was a really hard moment, but a really beautiful moment for us to pause the busyness of life as we know it. And as the world reopened, I think a lot of us saw the way we were living with new eyes, right? I think a lot of us have what I would call, and what I talk about in my TED Talk, as a what's the point moment. Like, why are we doing this the way that we're doing it? So what I want to challenge everybody is to think about something that maybe made sense pre-pandemic that doesn't make sense now. And what if we collectively as a society had the opportunity to rewrite those rules for the next era that we're living in? And actually, I had you on my podcast. And one of the things that I loved about, the message that you brought was this idea of the two mountains. We tend to think we work hard, we do our job. And then when I retire, I'm going to give back. I'm going to do all of these philanthropic things that I want to do that are fulfilling to my soul. But I've got to put that off until I get through the busyness of life. And you shared on my podcast, Designers Anonymous, how do we make those one mountain so we can do those together? As we study Gen Z, what we find about them is they are very focused on avoiding burnout. They are very focused on work-life balance. They're very focused on their own health. And while when you hear about Gen Z, you might be frustrated. You might think they're lazy, they're disloyal. We've heard all of the stereotypes about them. When you really dig into what they're looking for, it's not that different than what the rest of us need. We all need to cut the busyness, be a little bit healthier with our lives. We all need to, make sure that we are prioritizing the things that are most important so that we can be living those two mountains at once. And I think that the book really explores not what Gen Z wants, that means the rest of us have to give something up, but we look at data across all generations, and we really use it as a jumping off point, as a data-based focus to help people look at how we want to build work for what's next, not work for a system that died that was different yesterday.
There's such an important point of view that you are bringing. We have been sticking to traditional ways of doing things. There is some value in it, but not necessarily all of it. During the pandemic, when we all got a chance to breathe, Earth also got a chance to breathe. All over the world cleared up. Cities like Delhi, Beijing, that are so polluted just because of carbon pollution of traffic cleared out. The natural phenomena of inversion happening in those places during particular months didn't stop. Other things that happened around it did not stop. But just by removing that access of people, you cleaned up the air. Today, you're back to a dirty smog. Because we've gone back to our old ways of doing things. So in some ways, we really haven't learned. And that's primarily because my generation is fixated in doing things the old way. Just to highlight the point that you made about the younger generation and how they want to show up. My son works for a very large, very well-known company. He has a very important road job. I needed to go pick something up. I said, why don't you bring it to your office? It's closer to me. And I'll just drive over when you have a moment. We can exchange it. And he said, you have no idea of my calendar. I have not a single minute to meet with you. Yet, the same kid, Friday evening to Sunday, he's on top of some mountain hiking. So they have figured out their priorities in a far more interesting way than we have. And I'm just amplifying the work that you have done in your book that actually points to what is happening. And it will be huge for all of us to actually listen to that. Because we are slowly otherwise going to become completely irrelevant. It will not be a bad thing in some ways.
Well, but I think it would be a bad thing. And this is where I challenge in the book, too, that baby boomers are the largest generation, and they're beginning to retire. My generation, Gen X, we are not big enough to fill the gap that they will leave in the workforce. That means millennials and Gen Z have to step up sooner. So when we talk about this, there's lots of statistics I can give you about why we need to engage the next generation, talent pipeline crisis, a lot of things that we could talk about. But also, let's talk to those boomers in your audience. It's also very important that we capture that lived experience, the immense tribal knowledge that that generation holds. And this is not going to shock anyone, that the way boomers naturally communicate and the way these tech-native Gen Zers naturally communicate are not always the same. So to make them more comfortable and to help them really figure out these new rules in this new hybrid world that has text and emojis and, so many different conversation methodologies that we didn't even have. Think about, I got my first cell phone starting that job fair in 2001, because I needed to be available.
No.
So we have to also, not just for talent pipelines for these future generations, but also to make sure that we don't lose the immense knowledge of the seasoned generations in our midst.
Such a good point. And before we switch over, maybe do you want to just share the title of your book and where people can get it? Can they pre-order or it's...
They can. It's available now for pre-order. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or soon it will be available in many, many more places. The title is Work for What's Next by Amanda Schneider. And I would love for you to also consider following my podcast, which is called Design Nerds Anonymous. If you love Akhtar's podcast, you might love mine as well. That over the next few seasons, we're going to be exploring a lot more of these themes in the book. And I certainly hope that your listeners will consider buying the book and joining our movement to really figure out work for what's next.
Please do so. Just changing topics as we come to the end of our session, talk a little bit about purpose and the importance of purpose in your life and why that has been such a driving factor for you.
I think people get confused about purpose. I think some people think purpose has to be maybe philanthropic only. Purpose has to be something that feels good and is good for others, and that is true. But I think that all of these things don't have to be mutually exclusive. If you look at the purpose of starting that job fair for me, the purpose was, the driving factor is I absolutely needed a job. But look at how, by blazing that trail for myself, I was also able to blaze it not only for my 21 other colleagues that were graduating with me, but now for, 25 years of students now graduating that program because of the waves that I created. That is a purpose to me. And as I look at this purpose that I'm trying to drive home with this book, we want to think that we don't have to say to our little girls anymore, you can do anything boys can do, like my dad had to. But I will tell you, in my lived experience, it's still a real thing in the workplace. I travel a ton for work. People ask me all the time, Amanda, who takes care of your kids when you travel? My husband also has a very important job. He travels a lot. Guess how often he's asked that? Never.
No.
It's well-meaning, but there are stereotypes we all live by.
Yeah.
And as we look at what's happening right now, this return to office movement that says we have to go back face to face. There's no other way. We can't figure this out. The only way to do it, 5 days a week in the office, largely driven by white male CEOs above 55, because that's the way they learn. Those are the ideas that they cling to, that they know about. But it's actually hurting women more because still, even at my age, at my generation, women hold more of the caretaking power. So my personal purpose is also to say to little girls my age to much younger, we have to pave a better way that has to be built around more viewpoints than just the ones that built these norms of work back when they started.
Amanda, and I just want to reiterate the point for our listeners. Purpose is about yourself, but it is not just about yourself. It is actually how you then show up to move from the focus on the self to the focus on the collective good. And in that collective good, you get included.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be your motivation to start. Was focused on you, which said, I'm going to do something so that I can get a job. Great.
Mm-hmm.
But that does not translate into purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But if it translates into a collective impact, that's where you move into purpose. And it's not about giving back. It's not about philanthropy. It's really about how you show up. And I think Amanda just made it very clear. As we end, Amanda, share your one golden nugget, a piece of wisdom that you would like our listeners to hear and that you live by.
A golden nugget that I live by is focus on what's in your control. I heard an anecdote the other day that if we don't focus on what's in our control, it would be like putting 50% of the power in your engine onto wheels that don't touch the ground. And I think this is something that I am trying to live by more and more. Focus on what I can control and let go of what I cannot. Because I feel like if we don't do that, we waste our precious energy. I think our time and our energy are two of the most precious things that we have. So by focusing on what's in your control, you can really align that with your purpose to make sure you're moving that car forward and not just spinning your wheels.
This is such a fantastic message, right? How do we move from the weightiness of life, which is all the stuff that we have and want, to the lightness of being, which is essentially how do you stop worrying about things that you don't control? And I find that to be such a fabulous message for us to end on. Amanda, thank you so very much for being on the podcast. To our listeners, again, purpose is that renewable source of energy that continues to drive humanity forward. You don't find purpose, it comes to you. It's a journey that you are in. Start it, focus on your strengths and your values, and show up. Buy the book. Thank you so much.
Work for what's next.
Yes. And Amanda, thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for allowing me to join you in this conversation.